Good morning, Fred Buzzards. Welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Oh, not too bad. Sunday morning, early, all good. It's raining.
Good.
Not very nice outside.
Okay, so I have a bone to pick with you, just for the record. Okay.
Okay.
So this game you gave me 2 months ago that's one right there. It occupies my time. For the audiences who are watching, that game is really cool. However, I had no idea. Wait, is that a book?
It's the limited edition.
It's the game, but it just looks like it's in a book format.
No. Well, yes, but there is a book. This is crazy. There is a book with all the art and everything that they worked on from the beginning, and there's a comic book.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah,
and the comic book is awesome. The first one's like actual pictures, but the second one is actual like old time 1970s story from like
more of like an Asimovian,
right?
Yeah, kind of thing. So, yeah. Very cool. Well, anyway, the bone I'm picking.
Yeah. See,
I had no idea. It's one thing to play a game and really get into it, but when this game starts to dominate your thoughts to the point where you start reading about it online when you're not playing it, you have a problem, right?
Right.
So I'm on, the forums, looking at No Man's Sky, and I see this thing called No Man's Sky Archaeological Survey. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what in the hell is this? There is this university-trained archaeology team. Yep. I forget where they are, that they're dedicating themselves to playing the game to document and data, right? All of the alien artifacts in this procedurally generated universe. So I guess the bone I have,
it's true,
is like, do I continue with this thing and make it dominate for the next 6 months or a year or whatever?
Right.
Because it just that for me has just surpassed the level of geekdom that even I'm used to. Right. So thank you. Or do I call it quits and say like I can't even compete with these guys because they're, you know what I mean?
There is no quitting.
And there he is. Let's ask Joe since he's just joining us.
Right.
We'll get an outsider's perspective.
It's a great game.
Let's ask him. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to settle a debate.
Okay.
All right. So No Man's Sky, right? Cool game. Very cool game. Been playing it for a while. Aaron and I had just realized, we actually just researched this and found it. There is a research team, an archaeological research team, legit, at a university, who have put together an archaeological survey of this game. In other words, they're playing this game. They're going out to all of the 18 quintillion planets and like digging and documenting and data mining, all the stuff in this game. And I said to Aaron, like, should I continue playing this thing? I mean, this is like a whole new level that I can't even compete with.
It's a research team.
It's a research team. I forget what university it is, but and they have a website. They have a website.
I've heard an interview with them as well.
Oh my God, man.
Yeah, man.
Like, this is the deciding factor. Like, should I continue or just, I don't know what to do.
They've used this game for people who have issues mentally to calm them down.
Oh, that's me.
Yeah.
No wonder it works.
Yeah. It actually has therapeutic qualities.
There is something meditative about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I think it's a great game.
I cannot pass any judgment without having played the game. I feel like that's not fair. I think it sounds off the wall, having not played the game, to have actual intellectual effort put into a game, from a university.
Yeah, but you have no idea, Joe. Like,
but I haven't played it. I haven't played it.
You haven't realized this, right? That you are going to play this thing.
I don't have time to play.
No. It's only a matter of time before it will take you.
Yep. It will call. The Atlas will call you.
That's right. Sleep. That's right. Right. Like episode 34, he'll be like, guys, I was on this planet last night. And I warped his. Right. Great stuff.
I still want to finish The Sopranos. I haven't.
Oh, listen, when
I'm watching episode in over a week.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it as soon as you finish the finale, and the final scene. we'll dedicate an episode to the intellectual philosophical discussion of Tony Soprano's spiritual awakening. It's very,
fascinating to watch.
yeah, it's really cool. It's very existential. Well, David Chase, very existential kind of guy. It's it's a great show. I loved it. Watch it whenever I get a chance for stuff.
Mhm.
Very cool topics abound, gents. And speaking of, what's today? Today is
The 2nd of September.
oh, stop. I mean topic.
Oh.
That
World
world music.
music.
Why did I pick this topic? Why did I, or at least suggest it? I mean, I'm the wrong guy for this. I have social anxiety disorder. I rarely leave my house. I'm like, what am I doing with this thing?
Hey, you've got your flamenco and
Right. Oh, I forgot.
I think we're all really into it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is Thankful
Yeah.
back? I didn't.
Are
Check.
you? No, it's turned around. Yeah, I do the switch.
Oh, do you really?
I'm like the old Batman series where I flip the dial on the telephone and like everything turns around in the room.
That's funny.
All right, world music.
So I
pass
guess
forward.
my first question would be, what is the definition of world music?
Music of the world.
Ah.
Next.
Done. Okay.
Seems simple enough.
Yeah.
How have you guys incorporated, more of like ethnomusicality, I guess, into your own work? It's something you guys have studied. Did you, I know many, both talking to both of you in the past, it seems like you have this kind of eclectic sense of, other cultural, perspectives of music and different things. But like, how much of it do you actually use in terms of your own playing style?
I mean, for me, having studied jazz, it comes from African music and Latin American rhythmic elements and mixed with Eastern European harmonies. And I mean, it's all kind of a conglomeration of musics from different places, and the blues music from the workers at the time.
Right.
So jazz really it's the evolution of ethnic musics. But also, go ahead.
No, I would say, interestingly, it's the only American form that we have, though.
True, but it is clearly sourced from elements from other cultures. We're the ones that kind of decided to add these ingredients into the pot. And by we, I mean players in New Orleans kind of did it without really thinking about the greater picture. They just started creating some cool music.
Yeah.
And New Orleans was just such an interesting place because you had slaves at the time, and you had those slaves brought with them their music, and you had mixing of the wealthy white European descendants who with the slaves, and a lot of their children received classical musical educations. But at the same time, you had Congo Square in New Orleans, where on Sundays the slaves were allowed to play hand percussion and dance and really celebrate their African roots.
Yeah.
And it just it was the perfect setting for all of that to blend. And that's when Louis Armstrong came about and all the other guys from New Orleans.
In my classes, we do this section of literature. We talk about how sort of like after the Civil War, there was this migration that was starting to take place, not only just culturally, but even musically too. Like things were starting to be passed down to generation and generations. And we discuss how music was kind of an identity for many people in the American South at the time, right? And this kind of goes back to something that you guys know I feel about music being something other than entertainment value, right? Mm-hmm. What I love about a lot of ethnomusic studies, right, and just look at music of other cultures, is if you really dig deep, you find that music is kind of almost like a very spiritual thing for them, right? Mm-hmm. Right? And think about like early Americans, and like how they use chant and how they use sort of rhythms that are there. Look in something that I want to get to a little bit later today, if we have time, is Indian classical music. If you guys ever studied that, right? Like you're just looking at raga and the tala and those things, and how they're closely linked to their spiritual senses. So for me, like that I love that period of musical history, even in America, where it was still that. It was still deeply tied into uh, a way not just to express themselves, but a way to kind of exist. And somewhere along the way, I don't know where it was, where maybe it's just in just the overall industrialization of music, commercialization of music. I think we've gotten away from that. I think now we're more about, or at least there's a distance now, right? Where I don't think modern Americans, listeners, I should say, maybe musicians, modern American listeners don't take into account that music is a very kind of spiritual thing.
Right. I'd agree with that.
I mean, the intents of the writers are often not spiritual anymore, so you can't blame the listener for not interpreting it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was largely, I mean, it was very much based in religion, all the spirituals and even all the music that we have from the Gregorian chant was all the
Yeah.
Catholic Church. I mean, that there was other music, obviously. We just don't have any way of knowing exactly what it was.
Yeah,
'Cause it
right.
wasn't documented.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. Like, I mean, I remember, years ago having a teacher of mine who was really into sort of text, like musical text.
Mhm.
And I remember one time I went to her office and I said to her, I said, Dr. Tacconi, I said, can you show me like what an old musical text looked like? And she pulled out from her archive, and it was in glass. I'll never forget this because it was parchment that was exposed to obviously the elements, it would start to be affected. But what you were seeing was like, it really looked like old, I'm sure you've seen it in some capacity, this in Western art notation, they looked like little red squares that were like the note heads on a staff, but it didn't even look like a staff. It was somewhat kind of reminiscent of that. And it was so old that she was telling me that it's like, we don't have anything going back further. We don't know what it looked like. We don't know how it sounded. We have suspicions, but like take for instance, like Greek music, and you look at like all these awesome tunings, like Pythagorean tuning and just intonation and all these kinds of things that we study, but we really don't know what they sound like until we replicate them, or at least we try to replicate them. But all those texts are gone.
You're referring back to like the classical Greek age?
Yeah.
Pre-Roman.
Yeah.
Yeah, they might. I mean, they figured everything else out. I'm sure if they were building incredible, like what's it called, the
Pantheons. Yeah.
If they could do that, I'm sure they had some music.
Well, yeah, but what's really cool though, like in the Greek age, if you were a student, okay, there was this 4-division class called the quadrivium, right? And it was like geometry, mathematics. I can't remember the third one, but one of them was music, astronomy, and music. So for them, it was like music was a mathematical study. It was just like a sound-based mathematics, right? So if we had all that notation, or at least we had a way, ways to record that. It's really sad we can't go back in time and listen to that stuff, because we probably can learn a lot about how they treated music that way.
But that's why it's so important to preserve what we have. I mean, there's still musics around the world. I went to in Phoenix, Arizona last December. I went to the Musical Instrument Museum, and they had a display on every country in the world and their music. And you wear headphones and a little wireless receiver on your hip, and you get to listen to the music and watch some videos, and they had actual instruments there, and like it was one of the greatest days of my life. I was there within 20-30 minutes of it opening at 9:00 in the morning, and they kicked me out at 5. It was like,
you go home now.
Yeah, they're like, you have to leave.
Right.
But it's really, I mean, imagine going through Africa and finding music that nobody's heard in these, tribes or peoples that have been, you just haven't really come in contact with people who would have the means of recording it or care to.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, look, even there was a movie about someone who went into, I think it was the Appalachian Mountains, and was recording the music, the local music there. And, the movie had a lot of drama, but the idea was to make or preserve the music of the mountains, to find out what it was and to show it to the people of the world. But a lot of this music is out there, and we have to Still a lot of uncovering to do.
That's it, right? We got to really, and that's the whole point of this. I know sort of the musicologists, their big job is to kind of link how music works with the culture, right? And kind of learn from that. But I think some of the things that I'm interested in now is like just the uncovering of stuff that I've never heard before. All this kind of cool thing. Reminds me of like, okay, so you guys know who Ginger Baker is, right? From Cream.
Yeah.
You guys ever see that documentary, Beware of Mr. Baker?
No.
Oh my God, you guys would love this film. And I think it won awards, actually. Yeah, it's called Beware of Mr. Baker. So this journalist, got permission from Ginger. And Ginger's probably like maybe in his 60s, maybe even older at the time. And he's living, I think, in South Africa. Because you guys remember the Cream story that he went down, right? Isn't that where he went, Aaron? Went down to South Africa to study African rhythms and different things. So he's down, like living in this kind of like, what do they call it? Like on this ranch or something, this sort of, not of an estate, but it's kind of really remote. And he gets permission to go down and like live with him for a while and just kind of document and interview the guy. And so Ginger tells these stories. Well, one story that I love is Ginger says when he was before Cream, when he was like really starting to develop as a player and playing in some local venues and jobs, right? He met this jazz drummer by the name of Phil Seaman, right? Famous jazz drummer. Okay. Right. At the time, Ginger later found out that Phil was a heroin addict, and this is like his first brush with drugs and that kind of thing. So anyway, Phil invites Ginger down to his basement. Right. And to go down into the basement, and like Ginger is like really green at the time. And Phil takes him down there, and Phil's got this massive record collection, okay, of like all African rhythms and African records and different things like that. And Ginger never heard this stuff before. So Phil decides to shoot up, and he says, offers Ginger some. Ginger at the time had said, nah, I'm not into that. Right. And he puts on this record of African sounds, and Ginger explains it basically of like he was transported to somewhere else, right? And he said that was really instrumental in kind of opening his mind to, wow, like there are other rhythms out there. And if you listen to, which was White Room, right? Is the White Room, it's in 5/4 in the very beginning, right?
Oh.
Bum, ba, 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 bum, bum, bum. Yeah, right, that thing. That was Ginger. He decided to, when Jack and Eric, were writing the stuff, writing the pieces, Ginger wanted to infuse some of that African flavor. So he wrote it in 5. And then he makes this joke story. He says, I never made any money off that record because that was an arrangement, and arrangers don't make anything. It's the lyricists and the songwriters that make all the cash. But yeah, that iconic 5/4 intro, he says, was really a parallel to Phil Seaman introducing him to African rhythmic works. And then, of course, what happened with him, right? After Cream, he did all these projects where, he went down into South Africa and studied for a time, So really cool stuff.
That is awesome.
Yeah, watch that documentary. I think you guys would dig it.
Have you ever heard of Two Bob Crew?
No.
I saw them in DC. They have they all went and studied in Africa, and they play they're like a jam band playing over African rhythms with African instruments. It's fascinating. I saw them at the Hamilton, which is a pretty classy venue in DC, and it was a pretty mind-boggling thing to see. It's really entertaining.
Interesting.
Definitely. I mean, anytime I see anything like that, it definitely inspires me to think out, it inspires creativity. 'Cause, if you listen to what's on the radio, it's kind of the same stuff in a different order, different. It's hard to get inspired by what you hear on the radio, and then to actually create something that sounds fresh. But, you listen to African rhythms or Indian ragas for 20 minutes, and it's like,
oh, I know, right?
The world's opened up.
And the parallels, I mean, between, if there are definitely musical commonalities in almost every theory or theoretical system, right? It's like when you talk about the raga, for those that don't know what that is, right? In Indian classical music, the raga is the melodic aspect, but it's actually like improvisation, right? So I think they take a series of notes, and it's really flexible in how they improvise over those notes. And and they just and they cycle through them, in much the same ways that we would take phrases in jazz and cycle through them that way. And what's interesting too is if you go to like an Indian classical show, I don't know if you guys have ever had an opportunity to see this, right? People in the audience are aware of the theoretical stuff. Like with tala, which is the rhythmic meters, right? In Indian classical music, a lot of it is these really open sort of metrical systems. Some can be in 11, right? And you see people in the audience clapping their hands, because that's part of the system, and the audience participation. That'll be akin to like, going to a prog show and have everybody counting like, 11-8,
right?
Which would be great. We should do that.
Yeah. So the raga in their Sanskrit language, it actually means color.
Correct. Yes.
So it's really interesting. I have a book on it. And I was in India for my honeymoon actually, last April or a year and a half ago. And they have different ragas for different times of the day, because it really is rooted in their spiritual beliefs. And so, a morning raga is going to sound...
Marwa, is that what that's called? The morning raga or something like that?
There's a lot. I mean, I've got a whole book packed full of them, but yeah, so there's a different feel and a different reason for playing the music depending on the time of day. And, some of them are like Raga Yaman is essentially like our Lydian scale. But along with the scale notes, there also are rules. It's really interesting. Like you can't go, so if it's in C, the notes are C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C.
Right.
But you cannot go from B to C. So they have a rule where you can't move up the scale from B to C. So what you do is you go B, D, C. Like I can't sing it, but you have to jump over it and move down. And it's all these rules that end up creating the kind of the sound of that raga.
Yeah.
But it's amazing. I mean, they'll spend, they'll work each note really, really hard. And each note has a certain sound to it against the drones. And it's like the C's, the root is very stable, whereas the D might be mysterious or something. And that F sharp's a very like unsettled note, but they'll work that note and they'll stay kind of in that area for a while and work the notes around it and keep coming back to that note. It's really fascinating to see how that they go through the whole scale.
Is the sitar would you say it's like sort of like the anchor instrument within that musical system?
I mean, it's the melodic, it's like lead guitar.
Okay.
That or the sarod. Okay. But without the tabla playing the rhythm and without the what are the ones that play, they've got like just a couple strings, but they're playing those drone notes, the root and the fifth usually.
Yeah.
I mean, those are very important. But the sitar's, it's such a cool instrument. I have one right behind my computer.
I know. We want to see it.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you the sitar.
I want to hear you play it.
Yeah, can you do it?
Can
you play it now or not?
Need to tune it. I've been out of town, so hold on. I know my room's a mess. I'm sorry, but can you see it?
Yeah, we could see it. Well, I think for an audio version of this, I think we need to hear just give us a little.
Oh yeah, I can play it. I can just pluck it for a second. Here.
This is so cool, man. There it is. Yeah. Yeah.
And underneath you've got they're out of tune really bad. Yeah, I got that. So I was in Udaipur, which is southwestern Rajasthan, which is the state kind of to the west of Delhi. And so anyway, we were down there and I met this guy who owns a little music shop. His name was Krishna. And we were going somewhere and I was like, I'd love to see inside and take a sitar lesson. And so we agreed. I don't know if I paid like $20 for an hour, gave him half the money ahead of time and showed up and he taught me how to play the sitar for a while. And it was awesome. I mean, it's just such a weird feeling instrument. It's kind of like a guitar. I mean, it's a stringed instrument.
Yeah.
But the way that the frets stick up, it's really odd feeling. But then I ended up buying a sitar and then I by the time we wrapped it up in bubble wrap, into a soft case, into the hard case, it was huge. I mean, like it
It's like you're
was
smuggling a body out of India.
significantly bigger. Yeah,
Right.
and I like lugged this thing around India. At one point, like it took up a whole seat in the car, and we took a 17-hour train ride at one point from the border of Pakistan back to Delhi,
Oh.
and it wouldn't fit under anything, and so I had to sleep with it on a triple tier bunk. I mean, it
Oh,
was
right.
like snuggling my sitar, but I got that thing home, and the airline cracked it, and I had to have a luthier
Oh,
repair
yeah?
it, the
Oh,
gourd,
okay.
yeah, and yeah, sometimes I'll sit down with that, and I'll just pull up an Indian backing track, and
Jam.
you can get like Indian backing track in C, and just rock out for a while. It's
That's
really
crazy.
fun.
That's cool.
You should go do a show. Come on, you know you want to.
Right.
Just do one show. Do a sitar hour.
I need to. I've been bad. I just haven't had time to dedicate to
We're
getting
making an
anything
album.
performance ready.
Joe McMurray's Ragas.
But I would love to use it in a track. So,
Yeah.
have you heard? So Derek Trucks, who is very
sure.
inspiring to me, he's just so lyrical in his slide playing. He actually was very influenced by Ali Akbar Khan, who's a Indian sarod player.
Okay.
And he actually, when he was in his teens, Derek Trucks got really interested in Indian classical music, and but he had all these connections. His family was all connected with the Allman Brothers and Southern rock, but he really got into this Indian music and went to a seminar and studied with Ali Akbar Khan. And I don't know how extensively, but Derek Trucks is, you hear it, if you didn't know, you would wonder why Derek doesn't sound like any of the other slide players. But then when you hear him, he'll talk about it freely in interviews. It's really obvious when you hear it. He has all these Indian inflections in his playing, even though it's very blues, like based in blues and gospel music and Southern rock at the same time. But in specifically, I think it's These Walls. It's one of the Tedeschi Trucks tracks on, I think, Revelator album. It opens with him playing the sarod. And
wow.
like
Okay.
it actually opens with the Indian instruments, and then it like morphs into him playing slide guitar, and then Susan Tedeschi comes and singing. But I mean, that to me is one of the most wonderful blends of, you've got all these folks in the United States and elsewhere listening to Southern rock music, and they're being introduced to this this Indian music. And I think it's a beautiful example of how you can use world music in your music now.
Yeah.
So that track was These Walls by the Tedeschi Trucks band.
One of the things, I think, Aaron, what's the question you asked us early? You said about how we define it, how we define world music. Was that you said?
Yeah.
I think one of the things that this is getting to the heart of is, how do we accept music from other countries? Because I think the 60s was more accepting of this kind of thing. I mean, even Aaron used to talk about this when we were back in the state college days. They used to say how, like, who's the guy from the Doors? They used to do this? Krieger?
Yeah,
Robbie Krieger?
Robbie, yeah.
Would do a lot of these kind of Indian inflections in his guitar work, and it just seems like now, like when we think world music, we think of, these cultures are separated from us. But you're right. Musicians, we're borrowing all the time. We're pulling in stuff all the time, I sent you guys over the week, you sent you that Al Di Meola disc, World Symphonia. Did you guys get a chance to check that one out? Listen to a couple tracks in. It's interesting, okay, well,
I have not yet.
It's interesting that he calls it like world symphony, it's kind of the idea, like he's blending, but really if you listen to it, it's very Latin based.
Right.
There's a lot, what I'm saying? There's like a lot of Latin feels and rhythm, and that's great, but I think it would be interesting to see a player kind of pull from tendrils and just like different angles. Different countries have have some Pakistani flavors in there, have some Asian-based pentatonic stuff only flavors kind of pulled in, have some African-based rhythmic placements. I'm looking for that. I'm looking for players who can really, have a diverse palette
Yeah, that's hard.
It's
Oh
really
my
hard.
God. Yeah.
Yeah,
Each one is a lifetime's worth of study.
it's exactly right. It's exactly right.
It would be awesome. And somebody will do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and to not only be able to do it, but do it well.
Hmm.
You know, make them blend so they aren't um, pulling from each other or trampling on each other, to actually take all those backgrounds and kind of blend them so they work well together. That would be very interesting.
I found it's really difficult to find information, like teaching material, um, regarding these certain types of world music. I've not found the perfect lesson book for Indian classical music, and a lot of the good material is in, I think, their local languages,
Yeah. Yeah.
Sanskrit,
Yeah.
and there's some things in English, but it's hard to get really good instruction. And I've had the same thing with, I don't have a local flamenco teacher around here, but I got really interested in it. I got a book and I was, using some YouTubing and whatever I could find, and I've not found the right thing. Like I feel like I need to go to Granada in southern
You do.
Spain and just
You do.
spend 12 weeks and
Yes.
really get
Yeah.
that
Well,
foundation.
when I was there, right, that was exactly what happened. Like I went into a music store in Granada,
Hmm.
and I remember talking to some of the local guys who were there, and I said, "Hey, like, this is like maybe like day 6 of the trip or something." And I had just seen this guy I was telling you guys about a few weeks ago. Just blew my
Mhm.
mind wide open. And like, "Oh yeah, well, you got to listen to Paco. You got to get into Paco de Lucia, right?" So, and they said, "Well, strangely enough, Paco wrote a book." So I picked the book up and I read it, and it's almost like there wasn't so much a language barrier thing. There was a knowledge barrier. Like I quickly realized that I would not get it from reading a text in another musical language. I'd have to literally get in the street with the guys and learn the rhythms and the feels. That's the only way to do it. It's like learning any language. Another, you got to completely immerse into it. Like if we want to learn African rhythms, I'm not going to go and buy a book on hand drumming. You know,
Right.
we're going to get into a drum circle somewhere in Africa and sit down and drum with those guys.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. That's the only way to really do it. And then it sticks better. And then, because I mean, for me, the ultimate thing is, it's one thing to learn it academically and to just know it, but it's another thing to assimilate it into your playing style. That's what I want to do. I want to be able to be into some kind of a rock groove or whatever the case is and pull out a different rhythm or something, or a melodic idea that people aren't used to, because I've learned it, I've assimilated it.
Mhm. Fortunately, in DC, you can go to Malcolm X Park. It's right downtown DC. There's an awesome drum circle every Sunday. I used to go to that, and I think they're from Africa. There are folks there who know what they're doing. And that's how I learned how to play djembe.
Those are cool too.
So I mean, I'm sure that they have those kinds of drum circles elsewhere too. But if you're anywhere around DC, it's worth going to Malcolm X Park on Sunday afternoons. And sometimes there's like up to 100 people. There's people with there's somebody with a full drum kit. There's congas, djembes, whistles,
Awesome.
weird little noisemakers, and people dancing around, and it's a phenomenal experience.
Aaron, did you tell me you did a drum circle once? That you had told me that you did that?
They had small ones down in front of Old Main sometimes. I don't know that I ever brought a drum. I definitely sat there and listened to the rhythms, but I never participated. Should have, but I never brought a drum or anything. No.
Actually, for drumming, I use a book. I think it's called Dancing Hands. Where is it? I've actually had pretty good success with this one book that I'll have to find it right after the episode and link it. But there's some pretty good text. This guy takes the rhythms and he puts for like a bass tone on the djembe. He has like a little asterisk, and for open tones, which is when you hit the edge with the tips of your fingers,
Yeah.
he has a open circle, and for a slap, where you kind of aim to hit in the center of your palm, so your fingers really pop the head of the drum. He has a triangle, and he has it written out in like 1 and 2 and, or in 16th notes, and it's pretty good series of books he's got. he's got one that's on African rhythms in particular, and he's got one that's on like, I think it's called Hip Grooves for Hand Drums, and it's got like, he's got like he makes it more usable with a rock band or something. He's got like some funk grooves and does a lot with the clave.
Yeah.
It's cool. That's a cool resource if you're actually interested in doing that without having to travel to Africa or Malcolm X Park in DC.
Well, the other part too, I think is fascinating is that I think from a compositional standpoint, to have that arsenal, just imagine having like all these different, not so much even just the idioms down, but the ability to play instruments. Just like, I have a djembe sitting over there. I'm going to write something in it.
Right.
I mean, that's always been for me like a want and a desire to. Like I really respect these multi-instrumentalists, and I should know better. I mean, like that's not hard to do, right? Everybody looks at it and say, well, you're a multi-instrumentalist. Well, yeah, it's just because you experiment with them, and you study. We could all do that. I think we all do that to some degree. We learn new instruments, right? But just to have that access, the accessibility to really interesting things, like a spike fiddle. Holy shit, I want to get one of those things and learn to play it.
What is that?
They are, I think, Burmese, possibly. But you've seen them before. It's basically just like, it looks like a stick. It has like 4 or 5 tuning pegs at the top, and the spike gets into the floor, and you just use a bow. And it's like those things. Like I want one of those.
That is awesome.
And just write something on it, and record it.
Yeah, when you don't know, when you can figure out the notes on an instrument, on a different instrument you're not used to, and you don't have any of your normal habits and go-to licks and riffs available to you, it's really amazing what it can do. Things come out that you wouldn't have created on the guitar if guitar is your main instrument.
Yeah. Or just to get away from a stringed instrument, because I know, and I don't know how you guys are with this, but like every time I try something different, like let's say a banjo or any kind of, or even if I just pick up a violin and try to play something, I don't play it the way it's intended. I play it like a guitar player would play that instrument, right? And I feel like I do a disservice to that instrument because I'm approaching it from the only way I know how to do it as like my guitar fingerings are there. So I think it's even fascinating to get away from strings, just get into something that it's tonal, that is produced through a different kind of thing other than a chordophone, Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Brass, especially if you're a string player, do something like a woodwind or a brass instrument that's completely out of your realm.
I can't do those. I don't have the embouchure for that. You ever try it? Have you guys ever done anything like with woodwinds or reeds or?
Joe plays sax.
Yeah, I have a saxophone.
Yeah, I can't do it.
I was actually learning to play saxophone when I was working with Aaron.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It hurts so bad to play for more than about 15 minutes because I don't play enough.
Yeah.
But like you say, if I'm going to play blues on the saxophone, you just have to play really melodically and like really work the chord tones over the blues. And it's good for me. And then I go back to the guitar and it's a new way to think about it.
Yeah. And you're thinking more because those instruments can't do chords. You're thinking more melodically. You're thinking about how the notes can run together. And, with guitar, we don't really think about that all that much, the melodic line, because with guitar, you can do an octave very easily, or, any interval very easily. On a brass,
yeah,
it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I wonder if other players really dislike us because the fact that we could like do almost anything on the guitar,
I'm sure that's part of where guitar players get a little, and not to mention people look at guitarists as lazy. So there's a lot, I'm sure, that goes into it. But yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I do.
Like I have to work so hard to produce this tone, and here's this guy just like does it, And if he can't do it on this instrument, he does it through a pedal.
Right. Yeah.
But they have so many advantages. I mean, a saxophone playing a solo can play like so few notes and be so expressive with each note. I mean, I know that there's lots that you can do to make your guitar tone better and the quality of your vibrato and all that, but I mean, a saxophone is so rich. I mean, in any brass or woodwind is so rich, and you can so much control over your vibrato. It's doesn't even seem fair. It's just thick. With a guitar, yes, you can put on pedals that give it, the chorus effect or something to beef it up, but it just sounds thin compared to a woodwind to me.
Oh yeah, it's just the design of that instrument. It lends itself, I mean, to just these beautiful colors, and not to mention, like you said, like you're controlling your vibrato through your wind,
Yeah.
just through your breath. Which is something that I look. I don't know how you guys evaluate other guitar players, but one of the things I always look at when I look at guitarists is how is their vibrato.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me that's kind of like their articulation factor. Are they able to really control vibrato very slowly? Is it erratic? Like when BB King, like we used to teach this a lot of time in the studio, when he would do this vibrato, it was like this really, it's like kind of like really kind of shaky, erratic thing, but it was signature. It worked for him. I always went with this kind of circular vibrato that I still use to some degree. But all that aside, you get woodwinds and you get brass guys. They can really manipulate their vibrato more than we can, I think, because of the fact they control it through breath.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. You use your voice on a daily basis. You breathe every single day. I don't know if you guys know this.
Wait, I can do that?
But I mean, they have that experience and that expression through voice, and they just kind of translate it over to their instrument. There's a lot of control in an instrument like that. Whereas with guitar, it's all through your fingers. That's a much harder lesson to learn, if not years or decades to kind of learn that.
And with the voice, because you have limited breath, I mean, you hear this over and over again, the phrasing aspect. And it's what you were saying. You were more referring to the ability to jump different, larger intervals, but
Mhm.
You hear it over and over again, but you're told to try to phrase like a saxophone player or a vocalist because they have a limited supply of air and they play a phrase and they have to take a breath. And, guitar, we don't have to do that. We can play continuous stream of notes for 5 straight minutes if we wanted.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it might be impressive technically, but it is not musical.
I heard once that Kenny G, I'm not sure how true this is, has a technique called circular breathing. Have you guys ever heard of this?
Oh, like the
Is that a true thing, or is that just more of
what's
a?
the instrument? The didgeridoo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that. What is the circular breathing idea?
It's this. Have you ever seen a didgeridoo player?
Yes.
Okay, it's the same concept. Same concept. So they like, as they're blowing out, they're also breathing in at the same time. It's the circular kind of thing. It's interesting. It's not easy to do. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think biologically you can even do that.
Oh yeah.
Doesn't it have something to do with like getting some extra air into your mouth that you're then pushing while you're, I don't know. I've tried it unsuccessfully, so I'm not the person to
Yeah, I
give
know.
advice on that.
There was a guy at work that could do it. I've never been able to do it. It's an interesting thing to see. I'm sure, just like anything else, if you worked at it, you could absolutely learn it. But yeah, I don't doubt that was something that Kenny G could have done. Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe that could be a technique that he probably borrowed then, what you're saying, from these other
Australia.
cultures, right? Yeah.
Originals, yeah.
Yeah,
And brought over to the saxophone.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I know. For me, for world music, I've never gotten too much into world music as it comes to, you guys are talking about the ragas and all that kind of stuff. I've never really gotten into that. My introduction into world music was obviously from a young age, the Beatles, George Harrison, and
Ravi Shankar.
Yep. And going through all that. And then I think an influential album for me when I was young was Graceland from Paul Simon.
Oh yeah.
I used to listen to that album constantly. And to be able to hear all those different things that were happening, that was very influential. That's the kind of stuff that through albums and through listening through all the different kinds of artists, whether it was, like I said, even going to, I mean, I remember seeing Tito Puente when I was a young kid.
Yeah.
I remember seeing just all kinds of different ways of kind of expressing music. My mother would take me to all kinds of concerts where I was just exposed to world music, and I enjoyed it all. It's kind of where I get my background from today. I mean, most people look at me and they think, "Oh, he's a metalhead or whatever like that." And yeah, at one time in my life I was, but I thrive on this kind of, no matter what it is, I like to listen to it. I especially like jazz a lot. And, I like world music a lot. It's just kind of very enjoyable to listen to be able to hear all the different rhythms that are going on that you wouldn't necessarily hear. I know I dog on the radio a lot. And that's one of the main reasons why I think you were talking before, Joe, about how you just can't find that stuff. The musical soul is, for me, gone from popular music. You can find it if you really look for it, but it's not like it used to be. You used to be able to turn on the radio and at least hear a lot of those qualities within the music, because it was about the music. It wasn't so much about image, which is a lot of what goes on today. I really enjoy that process of listening to whoever it is, whether it's Herbie Hancock, or it doesn't matter who it is, just kind of sitting there and listening to what's actually going on within the music, not having any pictures, or if it is, it's the album cover in front of you and kind of listening to some stuff.
Right.
That's for me, that's how world music really played a big part in my life.
Do you find yourself though, like, okay, so like for instance, when you're talking about this, I think how I got into it, like you did, Peter Gabriel for me was the way in to world music, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I first listened to, So was the commercially big album for him, right?
Yes.
But what was the one before that where he was really exploring with different African rhythms and things? I forget the title of it, but I was listening to those records. I'm like, wow, like that was my gateway into world music. And then there was a film that came out called The Last Temptation of Christ that Martin Scorsese did, and Peter Gabriel did the score. And there's a lot of really interesting culturally expansive rhythms that are on that soundtrack that were there. So at the time I was like getting the Peter Gabriel thing, but I found myself like putting some of that stuff into my guitar work. So I mean, were you doing the same thing? Like when you were listening to these albums you were exposed to, did you find your guitar playing was changing? Were you trying new things?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure there were. I was hearing this stuff all the time, like I said, with Graceland. I mean, that album was on constantly for me. So it would be hard for me to say that I wasn't influenced by it somehow. And I wasn't incorporating those things into my playing. I mean, I had to have been.
Were you conscious of it though? Like were you trying to do things like saying, well, you know what, instead of doing this kind of pick stroke here, I'm going to try to do this thing because it feels more of a rhythm I just heard that Paul Simon did? Or was it just more kind of like automatic?
I think it was more automatic and maybe trying to emulate some of the things he was doing rather than consciously thinking about a style or a technique or something like that.
It's hard. You have to make a conscious effort. I wish I did it more. I wish I had more time to do that, but like actually sitting down and trying to play along with a song from, say it's Ravi Shankar, it's really helpful to do, but you got to actually sit down and do it for me to be able to really capture the sounds and figure out what it is and purposefully stick it in other places.
Right.
There's a cool exercise for audiences if you want to try this. And this is not so much a world music idea, but it will achieve the same effect. Guitar players, we're known for, unless you guys want to argue here with me, that we're known for playing a lot of stuff. Like a lot of notes, and in some senses overplaying and overthinking. It's really hard to be minimal and to create space, right? And I think a lot of times in world music, they do that very well. They know how to minimize the amount of raw material you're putting into a measure and let things breathe. So when I was in jazz studies, like this was really hard for me to do, but there was an album, actually a track that helped me for this really well. John Scofield's A Go-Go for me was it. And what I would do is I'd literally put that track on and I would just jam over it. And I would try to not just much copy Scofield, but I try to almost like play like in the dead space where Scofield was breathing, breathing in a sense of like, note placements and things. And that was a really interesting experience because that taught me like how to pull back.
So you played when he wasn't playing? Were you not playing while he was playing? So
no, I played the head. I played the melody with him, right?
Okay.
It's a really simple I mean, like harmonically speaking, it's 2 chords, right? It's just like almost like even an ostinato would be. But yeah, I play the head with him. And then what I would do is like in the dead space when he was, because if you ever listen to Sco play, that's how he is.
Yeah.
Like he like sprinkles, and like, so when he wasn't doing his thing, I'd play in the spaces somehow and with very small things. I would just try to like accent or maybe play behind the beat a little bit or play off the beat a little bit. And that was a lot of fun, because it's just, I came out of that track going, yeah, okay. So I can navigate through musical time with very little melodic material. And that, I think, when I would listen to other complex pieces, I'd be like, okay, that's too much now. There's got to be more breathing room. And you guys talk a lot about the soul and how your spirit comes through, and musically speaking. I think that's a good exercise to try is play along with this track and try to play in the dead spaces.
And that's a
great track too. Yeah, it's a really good track.
Scofield's awesome.
Oh yeah. Oh my God, man.
He was just playing with Medeski Martin Wood. I really wanted to go see that.
Great player.
That would have been a great show.
Yeah. Probably one of my favorite guitarists of all time.
Yeah.
Is Scofield. Just tasteful. Right? You can do a lot with very little. And the guy's got chops. No question about it, but he doesn't show them. He just opens the aperture a little bit to let some light through, and it's like, oh, that phrase was so cool. You know what I mean? Like, because there's just the things he does that surprises all the time, and I feel like that a lot with world music too. I think when I listen to world music, I listen to things I never heard for the first time. I'm like, that was an interesting phrase line. Can I borrow that?
Right,
a little bit. When you ever hear the record Friday Night in San Francisco?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Right, that record.
Yeah.
So yeah, Aaron and I used to listen to this all the time. Remember that one?
Yeah, I still show students it. I absolutely do. The 3 of them just going at it, and you're just like, oh man. I mean, it's the 3 of the best.
Yeah. So audiences, right, or listen to this album too. It's I got the title right, Aaron. Friday Night in San Francisco. That's right. Friday Night in San Francisco.
It's on YouTube. You can watch it.
Yeah, it's Paco de Lucia, John McLaughlin, and Al Di Meola. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, the reason I bring this up is there was an interesting story here that Paco said when he played with those guys, he had a really difficult time playing with John and Al. And if you listen to that record, I mean, he doesn't sound like he had a hard time at all. I mean, Paco is just a monster, right? On this album, but he had a hard time harmonically with those guys because he had said that, even though he had the technical prowess to do all the rasgados and all that kind of stuff that to keep up with those guys speed wise, he felt that in Western music, like from Western art music, what John McLaughlin had harmonically, he really had to study. He didn't really, just jazz itself was a huge mountain for him to climb over. And I always, I kind of feel that way a lot. It goes with world music. I think that we tend to, we go into other cultural backgrounds, musically speaking, I have to kind of get away from the harmonic stuff because I try to like fit it in with what I know harmonically, and it doesn't really translate the right way. I'm not sure why that is. It's almost like, it's not that it's simpler in its design, but if I try to force, like a 7th chord into something that's a different musical system, it just doesn't work.
No. Right. I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Right.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's like the ragas being, it's just a root and a fifth. That's your harmony.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to sit with that. And all right. And that's it. That's the structure. and kind of respect that for what it is and work within that system, you know.
I think with Western music, especially as of late, anything goes. And I think that's just this kind of practiced thing where it doesn't matter what it is, go for it. Whereas I believe, this is just my opinion, that a lot of the traditional musics that are out there are still traditional, and they follow those rules, where we just kind of have this kind of attitude of F it, I'm just going for whatever, and I'm going to throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and see if it sticks. Yeah, whether that's good, I mean, it is good because you obviously come out with new interesting ideas, but it also makes it really hard to try to compose something. Like you were saying, sometimes things just don't feel right, and there's a reason for that, because there are traditional rules that have been there for centuries.
So it's helpful for me to look at, there have been collaborations, like specifically like the collaborations between American jazz musicians and like Brazilian bossa players, and like that kind of, Dizzy Gillespie interacting with the Latin music, and Stan Getz playing with the Brazilian guys, was it Girl from Ipanema, that kind of stuff. A lot of that is a helpful gateway to that type of music. I mean, I'll go out and perform, and I'll throw in Latin tunes, but they're jazz Latin tunes. They're not like Cuban traditional Montuno kind of tunes, but it is helpful to have some tunes that people have already experimented with, and to go ahead and use that as a gateway to get to playing faster. You can pick up a real book, and you've got the harmony to Black Orpheus, and it's just having sing that A minor 7, and then you've got a B half diminished to an E7 flat 9 back to the A minor. Just like vamping over that and having that oh, here's some harmony that gives you this sound, and now I can explore the sounds of this Latin sound. It's really helpful for me to have that gateway introduction.
That's why I love Chick Corea, man. That was Chick Corea was that for me. Chick, listen to him. For me, I think the jazz guys are really, out of all of the modern musicians out there, they're the ones that kind of be really open to trying new flavors and bringing in new cultures. And Chick was just always that guy.
Yeah.
Even when you listen to his, anything he'd write, I'd be like, that doesn't even sound like something that I'd expect a jazzer to play. What the hell is he doing? Right. Oh, well, I'm borrowing from this, Spanish element over here. Oh, Chick, you're so cool.
Yeah.
That's how I got into his music.
Yeah. Chick's a beast.
Spain is such an incredible
track. Great track.
Oh my
Great
God.
Track. Very difficult track too.
Yeah.
In some ways, right? And some phrasings that he plays is really tricky, It
was a brutal one. We did that in school, and I was playing that over and over again for weeks and weeks, and I'm trying to bring it back if I ever have the time. But yeah, that's a cool track. It's really he borrows that beginning is the traditional Spanish tune.
Yeah.
What's it called? I forgot what it's called, but he borrows that intro, and then he makes up everything after that.
But speaking of Spanish, something else I sent you guys early in the week was Ancient Voices of Children by George Crumb. I don't know if you guys got a chance to listen to that thing yet. Now, this is not so much. Well, he's an American composer.
That's so the vocalist.
Did you hear? Did you listen to that one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What did you think of that?
Interesting.
Yeah, very cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, this piece was based on Lorca, the Spanish poet Lorca, and the idea is that there are voices that carry us through our existence and such. And George Crumb had this thing where he's like, I'm going to have the singer sing into the body of the piano. Huh. So if you watch that performance, she's literally sticking her head, right in the body of the piano and singing into it. And
at first I was like, what in the world is going on? And then I figured it out.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that I think if we can take not even just the musical material of other cultures, but even in ideas from other cultures, like the way they think, is for me another important step in our musical development. Because I when I think of like what Chick does, I mean he doesn't just bring in rhythms, he brings in sort of like the ideas, the feels, the embodiments of other cultures, and puts it into his music. I think that's another great way to expand. So if you can't necessarily play, the accenting that the tala does, or these talas in Indian classical music does, just the thought process, bring the thought process into your work. That for me produces great stuff too.
Yeah,
it's interesting to see how some music's reggae has made its way. It's so normalized in our culture. It'd be nice to see other things become as popular as reggae. But I mean, reggae, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but there's a track "Chicken Fried" by Zach Brown Band, and they go into they do the last chorus like with a reggae feel to it. Yeah, I guess it's just one more example of melding the world musics with American popular music in the middle of a country song.
yeah. I mean, obviously the number one reggae that comes to mind is Bob.
Yeah.
But I mean, I remember even being young and hearing like Spirit of Radio with Rush, and hearing that kind of reggae, right? That reggae kind of feel that kind of sits in the middle of the section of Spirit of Radio. Yeah, I think it'd be cool to hear a lot of those kind of influences, whether it's a bossa nova or something like that, where you would feel. I mean, bossa nova. I'm kind of thinking of was it Sade and
Sade? Yeah.
That kind of feel that came, and that was popular music. What's the name of the song?
Sweetest Taboo.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And that was popular music.
That was.
And I would like to see more of that come into, because I think that time of music back in that was 80s.
That was early 80s.
Yeah,
mid 80s.
And that there was definitely an exploratory kind of thing going on in the mid early 80s, with electronic music coming in, and people were just really free to cut, because we were coming out of the 70s and disco at that point, and at that point it was a breaking point. That's where metal started coming out. Before that it was very much like Ozzy Osbourne metal, and then it started breaking out into like thrash metal. But then at the same time you had things like Devo, and you had Cynthia you had like it just kind of, and that's where like the Pixies, and it just started expanding from there in these weird kind of directions. And people were open to trying a bunch of different things, almost like there was an anarchy within music.
Yeah.
And now it's just kind of the formula, because it works, formula because it works, formula because it makes us money. I think it'd be really cool to see an expansion of that, and kind of see different ways of going into like a samba or a bossa nova, or any kind of feels where you can kind of incorporate that into music would be very cool.
Well, there is a metal band now, so with that, we're talking all about sort of like the rhythms and the feels and this kind of thing. There's a metal band out now called Alien Weaponry. Have you ever heard of these guys?
No.
Oh, you need to check them out. Alien Weaponry. Okay. Now I forget where they're from. I don't know if they're Brazilian, or I could be wrong in that. But their thing was that they sing everything in their native language, and it's like death metal.
Okay.
So what they're doing is they're trying to raise awareness of their language in their culture. And blending it with like death metal music. It's like really cool stuff, and they're getting really popular now. In fact, I even heard them on NPR. They played them for like an hour spot.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's like, so that's part of it, is like when they put their lyrics together, they're trying to retain the language, but the sound of their language, which is for them culturally significant, and blending it with like metal rhythms.
Right.
Like, So for me, I think that's another, just a whole other level of expansion.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to see something like that happen. I just don't see it happening. It seemed, and the reason that I say that is because English is such a wide, and we were talking about this early in the week, you and I, Tony, about how the world is more prone to learning something like English, and it's less of a barrier because there's so many cultures out there that know the English language, English language, um, that it just seems to be the way to go. I would love it if some people, I mean, even look at ABBA. You know, they never even spoke a word of English, and yet they had a #1 album.
Yeah, yeah.
It's crazy.
Or
So,
Sigur Rós, you know.
right. Right. So it would be awesome to see something like that catch on. I just,
Well, that's culture. That's
Yeah.
just that's what it is. That's just all about, you know, when you get down to commercializing things and what the audiences in America want, you know, that's how it goes. But like even Joe mentioned a few weeks ago, in the underground, people are keeping that stuff going, you know, and that's where it's at is, you know, digging past all of the stuff we're hearing on the radio, and in a way even turn our ears away from radio and going to shows.
That's sad to me. I don't want to turn my ears. I want to go back to radio, so it's the popular thing. And I get it. Like the underground and people are keeping it alive, but I just wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't that way. I wish it was the complete opposite. That you would go to a radio or something like that where you would hear all these wonderful things happening, and it's just not. That just disappoints me. That's all.
No, with the technology we have today, though, I think that's the tide may be moving that way, right? Maybe the answer is when we think of radio as it's commercially given to us, maybe we have to just sort of get rid of that and embrace sort of the internet technology thing and radio that way, because that's more free, and we get our bandwidth is huge now on what we can hear and what we can be exposed to.
Yeah, or podcasts.
Yes. Like shows like us.
Anyway. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's going to become more of a thing. You know, and I even wrote a post on Facebook this week that car makers are now starting to incorporate podcasts into their car. So in the future, you will have the option. Yeah, you will have us as an option in your car, and hopefully along with that, as podcasts expand more and more, because I think I just read that there's about 250,000 podcasts right now, that more of those podcasts will be musically kind of inclined, you know, maybe playlists, or you tune into a certain type of podcast for a certain type of sound. That would be very cool. Maybe even one day on Fret Buzz podcast, we'll have our own music section with
what if
our listeners.
What if it got to the point where the future, like 50 or 100 years from now in the future, like culturally, we started a revolution with this show? Maybe like, you ever see Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure?
Yeah, yeah.
There,
how could you
in the future? They have statues erected to them. You just never know, guys.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. And the listeners, you'll be pioneers as well.
That's right. We help get that show off the ground.
That's exactly right.
Well,
yeah.
What do we think?
This has been a fun.
Yeah, it was good
to explore.
It's good. It's really good. So go out and listen to world stuff, people.
Yeah, it's extremely important. Yeah. If you are, if you are locked into one type of music, force yourself to try to listen to something else. For me, when I was, a young kid, it was whatever it was. It didn't matter. There was a type of music that you didn't necessarily listen to. Force yourself to just kind of be exposed to different kinds of music. It's so important, not only for you as a musician to just kind of take on new avenues and be able to speak with different people about different kinds of languages, but also kind of expanding your mind and being able to go back to your instrument and being able to, come up with new ideas. That's very important.
And it helps you to understand and connect with different cultures around the world, just to be more accepting as a human being. It connects us all. It could, music could be the path to a greater world peace. And
well, it is the great communicator.
It is absolutely. Look what Bob Marley. We were talking about Bob Marley. Look what he did. I mean, he created peace with music.
That was an idea. He wanted it to, like a virus, to spread, and it really did. It was really successful.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and you know, it is worldly. It is a world's language, and the more that we educate ourselves on that, the better.
Well said, man. Well said. Fret buzzards.
All right.
Have yourselves a good week.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys have any music that you listen to or would suggest to others, by all means, comment down below. And we're starting to get some reviews on iTunes. So by all means, drop on by. It helps us with our algorithm. So go to iTunes, give us a good review, and help others find the show.
Correct. And play No Man's Sky. Start digging. Joe's shaking his head. He just has no idea. He's like weeks away from starting this game.
University research team.
I'm
dedicating time to a game.
Aaron and I will come down and we will give you the crash course.
They could be going around the world collecting music samples of Asian cultures playing.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, they could be.
But they're not.
They're playing video games. Why? Because they can.
All right, gents. Have yourselves a good week.
Yep.
All right. See ya.
You breathe every single day. I don't know if you guys know this.
Was that you just breathing right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.